Hello, hello. So I tell people my videos are pretty sporadic on this channel. I don't necessarily mean for it to be quite this much, but over the past couple of months, I've had a couple video ideas that I worked on a little bit or had to wait on some stuff and they kind of fell through. And I got sick a couple times, and I've been doing some of the box opening card preview type stuff has been over on the Vortex Cast, which is a podcast I'm now doing on most Thursdays with Justin Birch, Kevin Broberg, and Will Godby. I'll put links to that in the description. So it's been a little bit on this channel, but we're here today, and what I want to do is something a little different, maybe not too different, certainly different from what I normally do. And I don't know if people are going to care for this or not, because it's kind of just going to be mucking around UVS Ultra, but I wanted to do sort of a deck profile, but sort of not. No pun intended. We're gonna, yes, talk about a deck and talk about a form of the deck, but I want to do more than just talk about one version of a deck. I want to talk about the process and the thoughts behind updating it for what's been not only a set release, but also a ban list that's gone through since the last time I touched this deck. And just to get a little bit more insight into, what's really working well, what's really kind of on the fringe of the deck, what kinds of considerations might you make when you're looking at how a deck is done and you're trying to make some hard choices about cuts versus adds and that sort of thing. And, hoping that, maybe people find that a little more intriguing than just a straight up, here's a final form of a deck, this is the exact list that you play kind of thing. So the deck we have in question, as you can see, is a Nott the Brave Irritable Goblin list, maining the Void symbol. Deck name because I am a Cypher wanter in Star Rail in 3 weeks. And the idea behind this deck is basically I wanted to play Void and Death. The reason for that being I wanted to play Dark Ward. I'm really excited about Dark Ward as a card, so I wanted to play a list with Dark Ward in it. And I wanted the Void symbol so that I could have a nice hand trap and barrier shield. I like Animus Shot and Tri-Gravity Beam and Ice Sword Execution, get to play, that whole sling of moves. And you get Hacker Extraordinaire to deal with vertical maneuvering equipment, because, up until a couple weeks ago, not having Asset Hate in your deck was not entirely illegal, but if you were going to do it, you better be killing people really quickly. So I wanted to have, Asset Hate, a Hand Trap, and Dark Ward, basically. And you look at those symbols, the best options for it are like King Ghidorah, which I didn't really want to do, Vax'ildan, which I kind of did want to do, but we've had a local running Vax, and I didn't want to duplicate him necessarily. And I had fun playing a Chaos Knot for a little while last year, so I said, let's just try a Void Knot and see where we can get with this. And part of the idea in this list, and this wasn't quite how version 0 was, but it's where I wound up pretty quickly, is a bit of boomer nostalgia for a deck that I played back in like 2019 for a PTC that was minimum deck size in order to maximize your odds of finding, really strong uniques. And Void right now, especially if you're Void Knot, you have Cabal's Ruin that you really want to see, you have Knott's Flask that you really want to see, and in my case, I really also want to see Pressured by All for One, as well as, there's some other, we've got some 1x uniques mixed in here and about too. So, part of the reason for Pressured for All for One is because we are a 7-hander who sometimes gives 1 damage. And for all the, good cards that we can be playing and all the card selection stuff that we can be doing, at the end of the day, we need more than that to realistically kill people, especially if we're trying to, backswings 5-hand size aggro monsters like Nick Reagan before they, find their second win and kill us, on their second come in on a big attack turn attempt. And you'll also see some of this deck was a little bit locals inspired. We had a lot of Deviljin and King Ghidorah locally, so there's some tweaking to the local meta in here. But first and foremost, I usually like to sort decks by difficulty. But here, the actual chronological view is a little bit telling. The first foundation in the deck was Pressured by All for One. I knew from the get-go that this was going to be a significant part of my plan for giving myself a chance to actually kill people. But because it's unique and because I'm running only 2 of it, I want to be, straight flat 60 cards. I don't precisely exactly need this card to win, right? Obviously, you're hoping not to have to do that, but it certainly makes life easier when all your attacks get +3 damage. It also means that we're strictly limiting ourselves to ranged and weapon attacks, which is fine on this symbol. Pretty much everything you want to play fits that bill. Second foundation of the deck was Inspiring Song, because this card is already really good, and it is extra really good when you get to tutor the top card of your discard pile. And Inspiring Song says you get 3 looks to change the top card of your discard pile, and then you get to go, pick up whatever the best one that it is. Incubating needs no introduction. Paying the cost is an interesting one. It's possible that this card should have more copies in it, but I had a game where I had double paying the cost and I used it a little too much early, and then I died by Exactsies or something, and I was like, I can't be trusted to play a big pile of paying costs. We're just going to play it as a 2x. Hopefully if we don't draw pressured by All for One, we at least got one of these to help our damage a little bit. The 4 practical studies is, to an extent, our primary deadlock threat here. This pseudo, if they want to block everything, this is going to act as a little bit of a free stun 1 as well. I do just like this card in general. But that Deadlock Advance is one of the really powerful ones. There aren't too many really powerful Deadlock Enhancers remaining, but typically your opponent will not care about 1 copy of this. But if you get 2 of these out, they generally don't want to go to Deadlock anymore. It starts to get really, really steep if they have to actually block your moves, and you're putting +3 speed on and taking away their best tool. Dark Ward, aforementioned, I talked about Devil Jin. This cancels Irritable Goblin Bolt. It cancels a wide range of other things, from showdowns to breakers to various on-hit responses. Like if they hit you with a violent animus shot, you can get yourself out of the discard with a Dark Ward. It's just a very, very good card. Arguably could be a 4x. We have the 4th in the sideboard, but with a 60-card deck, we can run, partly we have to run 3 copies of a lot of cards we might want a 4x in a bigger deck. But also, running 3 doesn't mean you're not going to see it. Lively Defense is a funny little combo piece for Nott. You can block with ideally Hostile Introduction, but possibly also something else, which of course we're playing because it's a Breaker 2 block on our Zero Diff. We're playing that over Botan's Coaching because Breaker 2 is way more impactful. But you can block with something, discard it to Lively Defense, get your -2 speed, and then pick it back up with Nott. And as long as you don't gamble it away, you get to block with that card again. So that's a cute combo that I really wanted to lean into here. Hacker we talked about before. In addition to Asset Hate, this is a deck that generates momentum kind of sporadically. We want to make sure we have some momentum spenders in here. We do also want to take damage on purpose anyway sometimes to get ourselves lower than our opponent. So the response commit happens even though we're a 7-hander. We might, be happy to have that little bonus on top of just making sure our health is a little bit low for a crackback if that's what we're looking for. And then as we get later, we get to some of the kind of niche clues. This is a little bit of tuning to add low blocks because our block mix in this deck is a little awkward. We've only have 13 with these 3 in here. But stopping for breakfast, action hate's good. There's plenty of hand trap action cards in the format. I don't know if this is... Well, I don't know if any of these cards are going to stay, but we'll get to that later. I'm with you. Low block on a spam, kind of on theme for the deck. We're doing a fair amount of milling, a okay amount of destroying. Not a ton, but if we have pressured by All for One, it's an extra 2 damage. Try Gravity Beam, destroys it and removes it, which is nice. And we've got an Irwin's Final Charge over there. Nonagon needs no introduction. It's Nonagon. It's kind of just all... It's not literally always good. Sometimes the deck doesn't care about this too much, but it's a very good, unique 3-diff to have. Barrier Shield is Barrier Shield. Nott's Flask and Couple's Ruin kind of speak for themselves. Nott is a Thief. She has the Thief trait, so she gets to play Cobble's Ruin and get -1 speed on everything with it with your 1/6 +2 high block, and the damage pump is relevant. Again, we are looking for damage in this deck. We also like to find some speed, but we're hoping that a little bit of stun 1s and some hand exhaustion can kind of let us get away with not having tons and tons of speed. We have a decent amount of high printed speed, which is nice, but in any event, if nothing else, we need damage. If we use all these tools and survive the aggro decks, we better be able to kill them, and Cabal's Ruin is pretty good for that. Attack Suite, you can see, Ice Sword, Try Gravity, these are all pretty obviously good cards that aren't surprising to see. Ice Sword is at a 4x, partly because, you see this Goblin Bolt at a 2x, and this was a late addition. This was originally the 3 difficulty 5 low 5, if they've have 15 cards in their discard pile card. That was a low block, and I decided to try it. I was citing an Area Goblin Bolt from time to time, and I decided I just liked that better. But then I lost the low block, so the I'm With Yous came in. But that 5 low 5 just stemmed from, again, I'm trying to find damage, right? So I didn't want to play just the 3 high 3, but I think it's worth it. Irwin's Final Charge came in, a couple versions deep, just a gigantic bomb, especially if you hit a Tri-Gravity Beam or you rip a good one with Violent Animus Shot and they're kind of open. No, this card's just good. It's just good to have this in your pocket. The Breaker 1 block's not nothing. Learn Technique is a bit of a weird one. Sort of another case of looking for momentum outlets. We have Ice Sword and Hacker, and that's kind of it. And having a powerful 3. Sometimes you only get a little bit of momentum with this deck. Sometimes you get a lot. It kind of depends on how your gambling goes. So having the powerful 3 move is pretty helpful. And it's a decent high block. And, while our low attacks aren't bad, our high attacks aren't that much better. This says 18, but 3 of them are Hackers. So it's not as rough, but it's a little fringy. So I wanted to have a high block attack, and that let me spend momentum on good things. And this kind of fit the bill. And the block, even though it's a +2 block, it gives that -2 speed to their next, so it's a pseudo +0 if you're chain blocking. That's pretty cool. Basically, Gouging Needle. Right? I really like Gouging Needle. If Gouging Needle had void, it would be in this slot, but it doesn't. So, it's Learn Technique instead. Sideboard is some block zone fixing, a little bit of making sure I have a couple of attacks in here if Sweeping Daggers is dead. There are going to be decks you face where Sweeping Daggers just doesn't have a good target, and I want to be able to side out at least a couple of them. Smile now is local meta. I talked about Devil Jin and Ghidorah before. Obviously good against those. The 4th Barrier Shield, sometimes they're just going to play Psychotic Aggro at you. The 2nd Action Hate. Web of Blades, talked about finding the damage to kill people and finding the speed to kill people. It's certainly a little spooky to think about facing a Rodon or something with this. So Web of Blades help make up for the speed gap. Theoretically could be useful. I haven't faced a Rodon or like a DR spam deck with this thing quite yet. We just don't have people that play Rodon at our locals. We don't have any Nick Reagans at our locals either, for that matter. So, though the extreme matchups are kind of a concern for this thing, but Web of Blade's there to try to help with some of those, and the 4th Dark Ward. So that's the list as is. And, in a normal deck profile, we would be done here. But we've had some stuff happen. So we've had the banning of vertical maneuvering equipment, which means Hacker is a little bit less interesting. And we had the errata to Devil Jin, not entirely taking him off the map, but maybe Dark Ward is a little less critical. Maybe we don't need the 4th on board. Maybe we still play 3 main because the card's just good. We probably don't care quite as much about the smiles in this sideboard, especially if our locals move on from those decks, right? So that's an interesting change. And also we had a set come out. We had a bunch of new cards that we might add. So I went through in advance. I'm not going to scroll through, UVS Ultra search on this video. I went through in advance and added all the cards that we might have some interest in getting in here. And there's a bunch of them, and these are in less of a particular order. But the ones that really, really super jump out to me are, Mikasa's Fatal Cleave. I'd really like to get a couple in here. This is a weapon. It's valid. We can buff it. And it gives us a low attack, which we don't have right now. We don't have any reason for our opponent to hold a single low block. And this is a pretty good reason to hold a low block. It is a mid block itself, so that's not super fantastic given where we're at on our zones, but this is a card we're interested in. The other big one, Moment of Normalcy, is very obviously going to get in this deck. We are somewhat predicated on playing 2x uniques and finding them, right? That's kind of part of the main reason for this deck being what it is. So we're certainly going to slip in a couple Moment of Normalcy. Everything else, there's a range of interest levels here. Filled with Doubt, just another good hand trap. Military Airship is just always good. Cape is another card that's just kind of always good. Tattered is a different form of Action Hate that does some other things differently. The only thing about all the green and blue cards is that 7 is already a lot for a 60-card deck. We are at 33 out of 60 foundations. We're at 55% foundations. There are turns when I'm playing this deck where I am putting foundations on top of my discard pile and trying to gamble them into my hand instead of attacks. The attack count is a little bit high. 20 out of 60 in a 7-hander that has card selection is really more than you need. But it's kind of, an outcome of just, not wanting to cut copies of things, which we're going to have to go do here if we want to fit in Fatal Cleave already. But this could go down to 19. There could be a future, which we're not going to do today, because I want to commit to the 60, but there could be a future variation where it goes to 61 or 62 to fit a couple more foundations in, just to adjust those ratios a little bit. So, as nice as all of these are, Resolute End is another form of Action Hate. They're probably all going to end up in the sideboard. you know, unless I, you know, actually want to like go down to 2 barrier shields main deck, which feels a little crazy, but maybe we end up doing it. And then, you know, a bunch of foundations. Some of these are niche. You know, I put all these on here. I don't think I'm necessarily going to talk about every one. One of the ones, you know, some of these are just, you know, there's more 3-diff uniques we could consider playing. Condescending. Monster Zero, we have a bit of a hand tax angle to our offense here. This has been in the deck at points. I don't think I've ever drawn it while it was in the deck. So it's hard to gauge. Even if you're not getting the 3 damage, this can be a card that wins you a game. If they're drawing lots of cards, this card's blank as all heck. A Cheerful Teen's another unique. Macho Concealment's another unique. Cut Deep's not a unique, but it's another way to put a bunch of damage on your moves. One of the things I was feeling at points, now we're going to sort by difficulty, was the having I'm With You and Hostile Introductions in your stage, having like, you know, three cards between these and having no way to destroy foundations is pretty annoying. You know, you might, if you don't have Final Charge and you know, the Tri-Gravity is only going to destroy 1 foundation. If you don't have your destroy 2, it can be a bit rough. So, you know, we're thinking about getting Draw Your Swords back in. We pulled Dangerous Hybrid in case we cut all hackers or cut some hackers. We still want momentum outlets, and this is a pretty interesting one that's also a usable high block. It gets to turn multiple momentum into something, which is nice, as opposed to just being able to spend 1 per turn. Different variations on Asset Hate and things like that. Another variation of just get some freaking damage. But the card I'm going to start with here... so, Devour Power I put on here, but this is very similarly shaped to a Learned Technique. It's a, you know, 4 difficulty, 4 speed for 5 with powerful 3 and a high block. But because this doesn't have the range or weapon, I left it. I'm just going to leave it on the floor. I just want to bring it up because it is an interesting card. If we ever wanted to get off of the ranged weapon theme and find other sources of damage, we could bring this in. But where's the one that's sort of the easiest to start with? Don't tell me I failed to put it in here. Now here it is. Undercover Infiltration. So this card is very similar to Practical Studies. It's a 1/5. It has a little stat pump that is very often only going to happen on your first attack. You don't get to chain do it if your opponent keeps blocking you, but you do get the damage out of it, so it's kind of sideways. And it has a very similar Deadlock enhance, where you get, in this case, you get to flip it and commit 2 rival foundations instead of committing for 3 speed and a seal. So we're in this situation where we're playing 4x Practical Studies because we really want to duplicate on this Deadlock, and now we're allowed to play as many as 8x Practical Studies if we really want to. We're probably not going to go quite that far, but, you know, one of the first things I'm going to do here, these I'm With Yous that were kind of here for low blocks, and it's a +2 instead of a +3, and it does some other things. But I think the first thing I'm going to do for now, and maybe we end up putting these back in later, is we're going to go to a 3-3 split. We'll just send this to the side. Of Practical Studies and the card that's brand new that I've already forgotten the name of. The where did it go? Hold on, I have Undercover Infiltration. Set 3, please. Error while adding the card. Oh. I don't know why that happened. Did it log me out? There we go. Sorry about that. I forgot to actually set my current deck before doing this, and I guess it doesn't let you edit the same deck like that. Anyway. So now we're at a 3-3 split of our Deadlock buttons, which is pretty cool. We have more than just 4x cards that can be our little Deadlock Rattlesnake. If they actually go into Deadlock and we have 1 each of these, we're going to devastate them. So that's pretty good. So that's one place to start. The next thing I want to do is I want to get those Fatal Cleaves in here. And like I mentioned before, this Ice Sword at 4 was partly before I had the Goblin Bolts in there, and this was like my only snipe. Now I have the Goblin Bolts, and Fatal Cleave can take something out. So I can probably live with just playing 3 of these in my 60-card deck. And then the other question is, what else are we trimming? It's going to be, I mentioned before, there are decks that are kind of going out of their way now to avoid running cards that Sweeping Daggers can hit. So 4xing this can be pretty bad feels if they just don't have any good targets. So we're going to 3x this. We're going to try to have 1 in the sideboard for when it is really good. And so now our 20 attacks is just all 3s and 2s. which makes it really hard to go to 19, right? Because that's a substantial odds cut if you were to trim any of these. So we're going to keep living at 20. And like I said, if I want to mess with the foundation to non-foundation ratio, I might just add a card or two to up the foundations instead of trimming an attack. But we'll go with this for now. We'll play it. And then, let's see, what's next? So I'm going to talk about Lively Defense. This is a really cool trick. It is pretty strong. This is effectively an E-commit -3 speed. It is a little bit hard to use 2 of these on a turn. I really only ever want to see 1 copy of these. I'm not that desperate to see one. So we're going to go to 2 of these. And then I think we can afford, because we don't desperately always need access to hate, we can at least consider going down to 2 hackers. And we may have more on the board. We'll have to decide on that. It's not that there aren't any good assets to hit. It's just you don't super always need to find it, and they're going to be matchups with no assets. And the card's still good even without that. But if you imagine they have no assets, I kind of want this to be a 2x. Right, 2 copies is sort of the rate that I want to be seeing these if my opponent doesn't have assets. And if they do have assets I care about, maybe I side one in. And so now we have a couple foundation slots to work with. And the other thing I'm going to do is I've added a few low blocks. I don't need to keep an exact, the same low block number or anything like that, right? This is entirely about that, but also stopping for breakfast is certainly dead sometimes. I'm pretty sure this has been a merry-go-round of 3 diff uniques in these slots. So we're going to merry-go-round stopping for breakfast out of here and have 3 slots to work with. 2 of those are going right to Moment of Normalcy, as we talked about earlier. And so, you can see we've got a bunch of cards in this list that just aren't going to make it into 60, right? There's some... we're probably going to grab one of these 3 diff uniques to close it out, but... some of these cards that we grabbed, where's the 10th Standoff, this is a nice little spam speed hate. That might end up being the 61st card kind of thing. But right now we're at 59. And our spam count is 20. We don't need more spam. We could actually afford to cut a spam. And we could consider going to 3 incubating, because as a 60 card deck that's milling ourselves, we cycle a bunch, so we don't necessarily want to be using a full stack of incubating anyway. If we get like 2 of them out or 3 of them out, if we start actually activating 2 or 3 incubating at every attack, we're going to get ourselves into trouble. So we might just do this up front here and go to 3 incubating, because I'm pretty sure we can afford to. 19 spams out of 60 is still perfectly fine for our 7-hander. And now we get to add 2 foundations, which can be like the 3rd copy of Hacker back in. We did give up a momentum outlet. I kind of want to try our Dangerous Hybrid. There it is down here. It's supposedly 5 difficulty, but not really. For all intents and purposes, it's 2 difficulty. We're basically trading 1 Hacker for 1 Dangerous Hybrid here, which improves the high block and gives us a different shape of a momentum outlet. It can add speed, which we don't really have a good way to do otherwise. If we end up with a bunch of momentum, we can go at it that way. It can reduce damage. One of the things about Nott is if you have no cards in your hand, that enhance twice per turn just says get a momentum. So that transforms into -2 damage if that's what you're in the market for. So we're going to try that at a 1x and see how it feels when we find it. And then we have to pick a... It doesn't have to be a 3 diff unique. It could be the Macho Concealment. It could be a second Nonagon. It could be, obviously it could be anything. It could be, a 1x that's kind of a redundancy for something else in here. And this is a little bit tricky to pick from. Condescending Explanation, obviously very good, just straight takes an attack away. Monster Zero, gives us a little more offense, and Cheerful Teen gives us a high block, possibly some card draw in certain matchups, a different shape of defense besides just blocking. So this is almost impossible to just kind of like vibe pick between. I think these are all fine and reasonable options. I'm going to check my high block count. I think we're going to see a little bit more of some high attack heavy stuff. Let's see, we're down to 12 low blocks, but we'll live. We can side some in if we need them. So I think I'm going to cheat the high block count up a little bit higher with Cheerful Teen. Just thinking about, maybe wanting to block a couple of Falling Titans if they've got the jump on you with those or that sort of thing. Pony might start to be more popular if they touch Nick Reagan, and that's a usually pretty high attack focus deck. And Cheerful Teen's pretty good against Pony generally, especially if they're on air and they don't have Forcing Surrender or any way to deal with the Pool Flood. So we're going to put that in there. And then it's just a question of the sideboard. So we're going to start trimming things that are obviously not going to be in the sideboard. We're probably going to give up on Where's Your Smile now. Although part of Where's Your Smile now is we are fine at blocking Besiege. Never mind. I'm just kidding. We're not worried about that. We could put even more Deadlock in our sideboard. That's a thing we're allowed to do. I'm certainly keeping Web of Blades. Decoy Duplicate's another variation of Condescending. But we just bring Condescending if that's what we want to do. I think we probably don't get to keep the 4th Barrier Shield in here. I think it's going to get pushed for space. Masho could stay. Draw Your Swords didn't make it in. We wound up cutting the Ang with You, so the thing we wanted more Destroy outlets for is a little bit gone. We probably don't need to obsessively play 4 Dark Wards. That's a fine card to have in your sideboard, but we're not necessarily going to do that. We're not sure what we're going to do with the actions and assets yet, so that's kind of sticking around here. I don't think we'd bring in Devastating Loss over an extra hacker. 2 more Metamorphosis is plenty. We could have a world we're bringing in any of these 3 diff uniques, singling them out. Young Warrior Candidates is a sort of generically good card, right? Form Commit, go pick up an attack at your momentum. But when we have a momentum outlet with Nott, we kind of already get to do that. If we spend the momentum to something else, Nott can go pick it up. And of course you can gamble it away, but by and large this is a little bit sideways to stuff that Nott is already doing. I just grabbed it because it's interesting. We rather want the extra Sweeping Daggers in the side. We put the Fatal Cleaves in. We probably don't need to side more Fatal Cleaves. We're not doing Devour Your Power. And I don't imagine we're going to sideboard extra Dangerous Hybrids. And now we have 19 cards in our pile of sideboard cards. So I think Web of Blades is staying for sure. And I would like to keep these 3 attacks. Even though we only have 3 Sweeping Daggers main, we would still like to be able to side it out for moves, and these help tune our block zones as well. It's possible that Learn Technique could be some other new attack with a high block or something, but this one seems fine. Actually, this could be a Devour Your Power. Hold on. I wasn't planning on going into the UVS Ultra search. But actually, if we're going to sideboard an attack just to be a high block with Powerful, it should be the one that we can also side in if it's going to have a really good stun target to copy or something. So, lo and behold, I actually, on the fly, wound up grabbing Devour Your Power here. So, 1, 2, 3, and the Web of Blades, I think, are set, and then it is this giant mucky mess. Airship's obviously an extremely good card. I think it probably only comes in if we want to side out. I guess Barrier Shield. I can't imagine we're siding out our other assets. If Barrier Shield's sufficiently bad, we could bring an Airship in. I don't know if that's happening. It could be wrong to have no airships available, but for now, we're going to leave it out. Cape's kind of the same way. Oh, Murderous Exhalation, Cut Deep, I missed on the first go. And now it's kind of just a matter, we're probably not going to end up with Tense Standoff either. It's kind of just a matter of what do we want our like action and asset hate type stuff to look like, and our sporadic unique bring-ins. I think if we want extra, I think we want extra asset hate, it can just be Hacker. I think there's certainly something to be said for, the 2/5 that blows itself up, but I already cut that from here. So I think that's fine. Marshals will sometimes have some really good targets. I think there's a strong case for that. Filled with Doubt is a card that can be a bomb against certain decks. This could even be a 2x in the side. You could justify doing something like that, and that's going to crunch our space even more. We're not siding all of these. I think it's a really tough call. Usually if decks are building a zillion foundations, they also are drawing enough cards not to be hurt too much by Monster Zero. I think this card is sort of a generic main deck card that you would side out for other uniques, but since it's in the side, we won't keep it here. Condescending has a chance to be really, really, really good. So we're not playing 3 different pieces of action hate in here. A Resolute End is the interesting one because it's the hand trap. It's the action hate they don't see coming if you're trying to cancel a runaway or something. We might also not need to cancel actions that badly. So this becomes a very tricky call. I think Entitled Costume has some benefits of being able to cancel a stun or a breaker or a powerful or something like that. But again, pressures our action asset count. So this is where we get to the nitty gritty, and I might leave that for after this video, nailing down the sideboard, because I could hem and haw about this a bit. I thought about most of these changes in advance, and maybe had an exact sideboard in mind, but not that exact of a sideboard in mind, but it's going to be something like this. We're going to do some vibes and decide whether we want to prioritize action hate versus some flexibility on our 3 diffs, versus having some asset hate is basically the decision here. Something we might do is main 1 Filled Without over 1 Barrier Shield and move 1 Barrier Shield to the board and kind of have access to both effects in the deck. But yeah, so we're going to think about that stuff, offline. We don't need to do that here, but that will be a wrap then for this deck iteration. Not really a deck profile, sort of a deck profile. So let me know what you think in the comments. This is perhaps similar to some Void decks that you're building or playing on, with different other symbols that you have options for. Or, maybe some of the cards I talked about gave you ideas for different things, or, let me know if this was worth the watch for you, I guess. Or if you're playing Nott 2 locally, even. I know there's a lot of new Nott players. That's a completely different shaped deck that doesn't have to worry about speed. So that, that one's pretty neat. Yeah. If you like it, drop a comment. Maybe I'll do more of these. Obviously, it requires some knowledge of a deck and playing it at locals for a bit first, which I'm not going to consistently always do. I'm probably going to play this deck some more at locals, right? But we'll sign off here then, and I will see you in the next video. All right, take care.